This secret sin might be destroying your life, and it's so sneaky, it's so deceptive that you might not even know that you're operating out of this sin. You want to know what it is? Pride. The Bible tells us in Proverbs that pride comes before destruction. What if this thing that is destroying you is your own pride? And I once heard this from someone, that there's a difference between being proud of someone and actually having pride in yourself. And as we break this down today, you may be able to open up your eyes and ears in the spiritual realm that you might be dealing with pride. Most people would say, I'm not dealing with pride. I'm humble. I'm not prideful. But as we start to really study the Word of God, we start to see that we're actually dealing with this secret sin, which is pride. And I'm telling y'all, once you think, oh no, I'm not prideful, that might also be a form of pride. So as we go into these different verses, as we open up today, we'll talk about what pride really is and how to actually overcome this according to the Word of God. Because culture has diluted what we give meaning to a lot of these words, and I want the Word of God to be able to enlighten the eyes of my understanding. I want to know what God says about these topics and how to know if I'm really dealing with this. Now I'm going to start from the book of Genesis chapter 3 just to open up on this topic. It started with Adam and Eve. It derived and really allowed us to inherit that sinful nature that started in the garden when they got tempted. In Genesis 3:5 it says this, "For God knows that in the day that you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." This is for eating from that tree from good and evil. And here comes the cunning serpent sharing them this, right? And in verse 6, "So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate." This just shows what the cunning serpent spoke to Eve. God told them in Genesis 2 not to eat of it because they're going to die. But the serpent came in and was like, no, you're not going to die. Because if you eat of it, you're going to be like God. You're going to know the things of God, right? And this is where pride comes in. So what causes pride? It's selfishness. It's wanting to have control of the situation and not putting something into God's hand. It's the inability to give this situation to God. And again, we inherited this from because of our sinful nature, right? Of our flesh, the sinful nature that was inherited by Adam and Eve. And pride can come any moment. Even myself, I have to continuously check my heart. I got to look and examine myself to know if this is really being prideful. And the more I know the Bible doesn't mean that I'm not prideful. The Bible actually tells us that knowledge puffs up. Proverbs chapter 8, verse 13, "The fear of the Lord is to hate evil. Pride and arrogance and the evil way and the perverse mouth I hate." God hates this. Proverbs 16:13, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." Isaiah 13:11, "I will punish the world for its evil and the wicked for their iniquity. I will halt the arrogance of the proud and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible." Again, we have to examine ourselves. You might be dealing with this. This can happen any point, any moment, any time, any person. It doesn't matter how long they've been a Christian. It doesn't matter how long they've been following Jesus. It doesn't matter if they go to church every week. We need to be able to expose this secret sin because of this deception, to be able to plant seeds within that allow us to operate from a place that is prideful, that is all about selfish glory. Because sometimes people could say, oh, I'm doing this for the glory of God, but really you're doing this for yourself. Check your heart, fam. Now, I just want to help y'all how to overcome this. We kind of went a little bit into knowing what pride is, but let me tell y'all real quick. Pride comes before destruction, right? We have to continue to examine our heart. And there's so many branches we can go into on the different types of pride and how we can fall. I just want to expose this so we can be aware. Now, how do we actually overcome it? And we might actually go deeper onto this channel on pride, but I hope you guys are at least getting some revelation around it. And if you're actually dealing with it, just know this: let go, let God. So how do I overcome pride? It's humility. Being humble. God resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. This is in the book of James. Now, let's talk about the 3 ways of how to overcome pride, but be able to come from a place of humility. How can I be humble? Because humility is what's going to cure the pridefulness. Number 1 is God's will. we must be able to abide in God's will. It says this in 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 to 17. Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Then it exposes the stuff, right, that is of the world. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it. But he who does the will of God abides forever. In order to overcome pride, we must be able to do the will of God. He who does the will of God abides forever. So one way to be able to remain humble and to allow humility to cure you being prideful is doing God's will. Number two, another way to be humble is prayer. Being prayerful, because you're either prayerful or you're prideful, right? Apostle Paul says, pray without ceasing. This is the will of God, is to pray without ceasing. So again, prayerful or prideful. And going into prayer just shows that we don't rely on ourselves. We rely on God. We take our situations and we allow him to come before us. We inquire of the Lord. You'll see David, before he does a lot of major things as king and goes to battle, goes to wars, to fight against the enemies, he inquires of the Lord. Just like Moses, when the Israelites were complaining and wanting to stone him and kill him, he didn't come back at them out of pride. Actually, the Bible talks about how Moses was very humble. He inquired of God even when his own people were coming against him. Prayerful or prideful, you can't have one or the other, or you can't have both at the same time. It's either one or the other. Are you prayerful? Because prayer is a way to humble ourselves before God. Last thing, number three, another form of humility is fasting. And we have actually a whole playlist on this channel on fasting. Isaiah 58 talks about fasting that pleases God, a way to abstain from things that we rely on. Because you might rely on your energy drink, your coffee. You might rely on food in certain situations, and that's really another sin, which is gluttony. You might rely on all these things above God when it comes to seeking the Father. Like I know people that will eat just to be able to, kill time is what they say. So fasting is a form, abstaining from things in order for us to separate ourselves, sanctify ourselves, and really lean on God. Put everything on God. Get our strength from the Lord. Fasting is another way to humble ourselves. And a lot of this, the prayer and fasting also comes, one verse I like is in 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who call me by my name would just pray, would humble themselves, would seek my face, would turn away from their wicked ways, then I will hear them and heal their land. So I think being able to fast and pray are definitely ways to humble ourselves. And then we talked about it, God's will. God's will. So all these things allow us to be able to overcome the temptation and to make sure that we don't get too much of ourselves, or we're not so full of ourselves that we can't be full of God. We got to empty ourselves of the world, right? The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. Empty ourselves and fill ourselves up with the glory of the Lord, with his Spirit, in Jesus' mighty name.